Hi, I'm really happy to be able to share with you the results of our workshop about ethics. So we have a lot to talk about, so I'm going straight in. During the first workshops, we've been discussing about a lot of parts that are related to ethics. And ethics is really a big subject, so we took every one of those and tried to find links between all those subjects. And we found out that most of them are related to the ethical question, who decides? So now I would like you to join me in an experience. We'll see.
Hello, my name is eHealth, a prototype of next-generation doctor. Your DNA has been sequenced and analyzed. Here are the results. There's a 72% chance you develop Alzheimer's in the next 10 years. 39% of chance you will develop pancreatic cancer by the age of 60 and 84% chance you will die of brain cancer. Do you wish to plan your surgery for Alzheimer's in 2021? Good luck for the rest of your life. eHealth. Your doc.
Well, now it sounds quite funny, but imagine a world where this is reality. Would you like it? Who should decide if people are allowed to have done researches or diagnosis in this way? Should it be on the individual to choose, or should the state decide? Now, one example where the state, why the state, should forbid this kind of research could be that when this information is around, it can be misused by insurance companies or by employers, for example.
But on the other hand, the information can be made secure. This is an example that we have, for example, with e-banking. So we are able to look at our accounts securely without anyone else being able to look at them. And this system could be implemented with genetic data.
And what about just protecting people from too much information? It can be just too much, and this can be dangerous.
Well, on the other hand, people are adults. They should be able to make their own decisions for their own lives. Since this really only affects them, and because it only affects their own DNA, they should be able to decide whether they want to know the information or not. Otherwise, we have the risk of going into a system like China or East Germany before the fall of the Berlin Wall, where the government tries to protect its citizens, but in doing so strips them of their most basic rights, such as the right to information.
Let's think of another thing. When you know, I'm going to die in 3 years, I think that can make people depressive, and they are going to kill themselves or something.
Well, on the other hand, maybe it will make them want to change their lifestyle. It will make them want to live a different life, since they know that they have ultimately a shorter one. So this can also have a positive effect on their life.
One other important argument is that you cannot know how useful it is to know one's whole genome.
Or you can use this information for diagnostics, for example. If someone comes in to the doctor with a symptom that may relate to a genetic disease, one can look at his DNA, and if the person has the gene for this disease, we can make sure to adapt the treatment for this disease sooner.
Well, I think in this case, people could also mimic symptoms just to test if they have a certain disease. But there's also quite another reason to forbid these techniques. From the possibility to do this kind of diagnosis, there can really quickly come the duty to do so. And one possibility to prevent this from happening could be to stop creating this information, which means in certain areas just to stop research.
But on the other hand, maybe this research will be useful later on, but we don't know yet for what exactly, so maybe we should continue the research to learn if this research will actually be productive in the future. So you see, really, there are arguments for and against who decides. Should it be the individual, or should it be the government deciding for the good of the individual? And we went on and on discussing about this in the ethics group. And then, in some cases, it doesn't just affect the individual. So if you take the example of Huntington's disease, this is a genetic disorder that destroys brain cells, and it is passed on through the genes from parent to children. If a child who has Huntington's disease, so as you can see, the brain above is being destroyed by Huntington's disease, the one below is a normal brain. So if a child decides to, well, the son of someone or the daughter of someone decides to have his or her DNA tested to see if they have the gene for Huntington's disease, and they learn that they have Huntington's disease, then this means that one of his parents also has the gene and will also start developing the symptoms in a later stage of his life. But what if the parent didn't want to know this, didn't want to have this information? So there's always a good and a bad side, lots of different things to take into consideration, and it's very difficult in ethics to actually come to a solution. There are no real solutions, just compromises and weighing the good and the bad. So another case where it's very difficult to know who decides is in the case of abortion. So especially in the case of a mentally disabled child. Can we test the genes of the child to see if he has a gene or if he is mentally disabled, and if so, can the parents decide to abort because of his mental disability? So one can say that having a mentally disabled child is a huge burden, both financially, emotionally, in terms of time and energy for parents. So this is an argument for giving the right to the individual to decide whether to take a test or not.
Well, but don't you think that all human beings are equal? And this could be a very important argument to forbid looking at unborn children. Because when you see, oh, this child will be handicapped, you could decide to make an abortion, also when you would like to have a healthy child. So there's a danger that are done abortions just because of financial reasons, let's say. And perhaps you could also say that's just part of these families' lives to have a disabled child.
And on the other hand, you can also say, though this argument can go a bit far, that if we were in the wild, people with disabilities would not be able to survive. It's natural selection, survival of the fittest. So should we really try and make these people survive when it could actually not be in the interest of society as a whole?
Well, today we have the possibility to do so. We can help them, and they are quite an important part of our society.
So ultimately it's to see, you could also say the mother, to weighing the mother's preference against the fetus's preference. And you could say that a fetus doesn't know, it doesn't have self-awareness and doesn't have preferences because he or she cannot think yet. So ultimately it's the mother's preferences weighed next to nothing else. So this is an argument to let the parents decide whether they want to abort or not. A very vivid example of this is the case of baby Doe. A couple in Indiana 20 years ago gave birth to a child who had very severe physical and mental defects. And this child also had a defect between his stomach and his mouth, which meant that he could not feed himself. Now, there was the possibility of surgical corrections, but the parents decided to deny surgery to the child because they thought that having to take care of this child with Down syndrome would be too much of a burden for them. Ultimately, the child died, and then this gives way to very difficult questions. So was it right, was it ethically right for them to let this child die? What is the difference between letting a child die by not doing anything and the difference and having an abortion? Is there an ethical difference? So it's very difficult really to know about this and to decide who decides, who can tell the individual to do this, or can the individual decide for him or herself?
There are two other reasons against. Firstly, we can't know the consequences. We may not know what information is really in the DNA. They may be much more than we know today. And secondly, where to draw a borderline. I mean, one day maybe we can see if a child gets very intelligent or not. If not, is it disabled? Or if a child gets a sore throat a little bit quicker than other children, is it disabled? One important thing we had to look at was how to find solutions to such questions. And there, Samia Hurst gave us some tips. It's firstly about not looking for arguments or reasons that are just important or valuable for you. You have to look for arguments that everyone can accept as an argument. He doesn't have to agree, but he has to agree that it is an argument. And you have to look for arguments and for rules that you think other people might use to rule their own lives. So our work was to find these valuable arguments that can be used in future discussions about ethics in the future of health.
So we hope you will consider some of these ideas. We hope you'll take into account the importance of ethics and the differences of opinions between people. Thank you very much for your attention.